Just before we do anything, we need to acknowledge that even being able to do that or to speak anything comes from the blessings of the Vaishnavas and Guru and Krishna. And any ability comes from him as well.
And so sorry, I forgot to remind you, please leave time before questions and reflections.
At 45, right?
Yeah, or 10 minutes, whichever works best for you. Thank you so much. Sorry.
I'll aim for that. Jaya Rai Tamai Davai Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Givaratari Yashodanandana Raja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari. This is the translation of this beautiful bhajan, which Srila Prabhupada loved so much and continues to love. Krishna is the lover of Radha. He displays many amorous pastimes in the groves of Vrindavan. He is the lover of the cowherd maidens of Raj, the holder of the great hill named Govardhan, the beloved son of Mother Yashoda, the delighter of the inhabitants of Raj. And he wanders in the forests along the banks of river Yamuna. Om Jnanat Mirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashtatya Deshatarine. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Shri Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And before Bhagavatam, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Thank you for joining me in prayers. Before I even read, I would like to beg for the blessings, because I feel that even reading is such a beautiful service, and so much can be transferred in how we articulate Bhagavatam as well. And so please bless me that I can read well, then I can speak well, then I can live well, and I can serve you too in the meantime. So I'll share the screen. If I can find it. Oh, I just realized that I have a private window, and I think because of that, it cannot be shared. So
I can share it for you if you want.
Yes, please. Actually, I think it will be easier for me to scroll if I do it myself. But did you share the verses from today? Oh. That's okay, that's perfect. Then I'll read from your screen. Okay, so we have 3 verses today. We're going to read all of them, but only the synonyms and for the last one. And I do feel that Sanskrit is important, so I'm going to recite Sanskrit for all of them. So it's Srimad Bhagavatam 10:33-37 to 39. Nasuyan kalu Krishnaya mohitastasya mayaya manyamana svapashvasthan svansvadarshan rajaukasahal. And translation and purport by disciples of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The cowherd men, bewildered by Krishna's illusory potency, thought their wives had remained home at their sides. Thus they did not harbor any jealous feelings against him, just against Krishna. Purport: because the gopis loved Krishna exclusively, Yoga Maya protected their relationship with the Lord at all times, even though they were married. Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti quotes from the Ujjvala Nilamani as follows: Maya kalpita tadrikstrit silanena susuyapi najatu vrajadavinam patipi sahasangama. The gopis' jealous husbands consorted not with their wives, but with dabus manufactured by Maya. Thus these men never actually had any intimate contact with the divine ladies of Braj. The gopis are the internal energy of the Lord and can never belong to any other living being. Krishna arranged their apparent marriage to other men simply to create the excitement of parakya rasa, the love between a married woman and her paramour. These activities are absolutely pure because they are the Lord's pastimes, and saintly persons since time immemorial have relished these supreme spiritual events. Can we go to the next verse? Thank you. I'll just take one note. Okay, verse 38. Brahmaratra upavrite vasudevanumotita Anichantyo yayurgopya svagrihan bhagavat priyai. Translation: after an entire night of Brahma had passed, Lord Krishna advised the gopis to return to their homes. Although they did not wish to do so, the Lord's beloved consorts complied with his command. Purport: in the Bhagavad Gita 8:17, Lord Krishna explains, by human calculation, 1,000 ages taken together is the duration of Brahma's one day. And such also is the duration of his night. Thus 1,000 ages entered within a single 12-hour night when Lord Krishna performed his rasa dance. Wow. Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti compares this inconceivable impression of time to the fact that many universes fit neatly within the 40-mile range of earth-free Vrindavan. Or one may consider that Mother Yashoda could not encircle the small abdomen of child Krishna with numerous robes, and that at another time he manifested many universes within his mouth. The transcendence of spiritual reality above and beyond mundane physics is concisely explained in Sri Rupa Goswami's Lagu Bhagavatamrita. Evam prabho priyanam cha tamnascha samaryasya cha avichintya prabhavatvat atra kinchina gurtanam. It translates to, nothing is impossible for the Lord. His devotees, his transcendental abode, or the time of his pastimes, for all these entities are inconceivably powerful. Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti further explains that the word Vasudevanumoditaha indicates that Lord Krishna advised the gopis to assure the success of these pastimes, you and I should keep them secret. The word Vasudeva, a name of Krishna, also indicates Lord Krishna's plenary expansion, who acts as the presiding deity of consciousness. When the word Vasudeva is understood in this context, the word Vasudeva Numoditaha indicates that the presiding deity of consciousness, Vasudev, manifested embarrassment and fear of their elders within the gopis' hearts, and therefore it was only with great reluctance that the young girls returned home. Our last verse, 39. Vikriditam brachavaduphiridam cha Vishnu Shraddhan vito nishnisat atavarnayidyal Bhaktim param bhagavati pratilabhya kamam Hridrogam ashva pinyutta chirenatira. Synonyms: Vikriditam, the sporting, Vrajavaduphi, with the young woman of Vrindavan, Idam, this, Cha, and, Vishnu, by Lord Vishnu, Shraddha Anvita, faithfully, Anusnutyat, hears, Atha, or, Varnayet, describes, Ya, whom, Bhaktim, devotional service, Param, transcendental, Bhagavati, unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Pratilabhya, obtaining, Kamam, material lust, Hrit, in the heart, Rogam, the disease, Ashu, quickly, Apahinoti, he drives away, Achirena, without delay, Tiraha, sober. Translation: anyone who faithfully hears or describes the Lord's playful affairs with the young gopis of Vrindavan will attain the Lord's pure devotional service. Thus he will quickly become sober and conquer lust, the disease of the heart. Purport: the extraordinary power of Lord Krishna conjugal pastimes is clearly revealed here. Qualitatively, the Lord's spiritual loving pastimes are the diametric opposite of material, lusty affairs, so much so that simply by hearing about the Lord's pastimes, a devotee conquers sex desire. By reading pornographic literature or hearing about material romance, we certainly do not conquer sex desire, but rather increase our lust. But hearing or reading about the Lord's conjugal affairs has exactly the opposite effect, because they are of the opposite nature, being purely spiritual. Therefore, it is by the causeless mercy of Lord Krishna that he exhibits his Rasa Leela within this world. If we become attached to this narration, we will experience the bliss of spiritual love and thus reject the perverted reflection of that love, which is called lust. As nicely put by Lord Krishna in Bhagavad Gita 2:59, Param dristva nivartate. Once having directly experienced the Supreme, one will not return to material pleasures. Thus ends the purports of the humble servants of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada to the 10th canto, 33rd chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The Rasa Dance. Thank you so much for hearing. So I'll go verse by verse and say a little bit. First thing that came up, and I actually had it right now as I was reading, is the beautiful word exclusive that is described towards gopis' love towards Krishna. And so that they are fully, completely absorbed in service towards the Lord and exclusive in that. And how many of us can actually say that we are exclusive in our service or in our devotion? We are simultaneously often serving two masters, or trying to serve multiple masters, trying to serve the Lord, and at the same time serving our senses and our desires. And so the gopis show what it means to be exclusive. And in this verse, it also describes that the relationship with the Lord is a private matter of the heart. Because despite the circumstances of being in specific arrangements that seemingly obstruct closeness with Lord Krishna, because they are married to other devotees, they're actually protected in their relationship because in their heart they accepted Krishna as their only Lord and as the only object of love. And so in that way, gopis fully belonged and continue to belong to the Lord and serve him in the deepest core of their hearts. And that reminded me of Lord Chaitanya's pastimes, specifically thinking about Haridas Thakur, the Nam Acharya of our movement. And it's that he was experiencing the highest levels of love towards Godhead through chanting the holy name, even in the situation that seemingly was obstructing, because he was born in specific circumstances, could never enter the temple of Lord Jagannath, and he would sit and chant the holy names, despite many obstacles that were arranged for his glorification, and attained the highest position and was and continues to be the Namacharya, the one who actually shows us the way of how we can connect with the holy name on the deepest possible way. And so the Lord creates arrangements for us to develop love towards him and to strengthen our attachment, or to even develop our attachment in the first place. And so everything we experience is a chance to bring us to the place of remembering Krishna and taking shelter. And that is quite a hopeful statement, actually, to think about our lives as orchestrated in a way that are meant to facilitate us coming closer to the Lord. And so we can take those chances and see any happening as an opportunity to come closer to Krishna, or we can actually let them go and waste those opportunities, and in that way become more entangled. So that's also for me a personal reflection of even at the end of the day, thinking about what wonderful things that Krishna arranged today that I could come closer to him, and also how many of these opportunities I actually wasted because of my own ignorance, or because of not being aware, or being focused on my own lamentation. And so just as the gopis in Bhagavad Gita, there is a description that the devotee knows no one but the Lord. And in that way, the Lord reciprocates with the same sentiment, giving himself to a devotee. Which brings us to a simple instruction to offer everything. And it's simple, and yet it's a beautiful instruction for a lifetime of service. How can we offer everything? From the first moments of being awake to the last moments of being asleep, and even when we are in lesser consciousness, can we actually even offer everything too? And that is the perfection and the beauty of contemplating of how can this be possible, or how every day can I actually come closer into offering more than I'm doing the previous day, remembering that actually everything is meant to be offered. And the last line of the purport talks about relishing Srimad Bhagavatam, how the sages relish reading these pastimes of the Lord. And I wanted to bring the point I heard from Swayam Bhagavan Kesha Maharaj about how we develop taste for Bhagavatam. And the first step is to read more, and to read regularly. And that helps us to develop taste. And yet it's such a high position to actually relish Bhagavatam, that if we cannot do it, there is no hope lost, because we actually can develop a little bit of taste by associating with those who actually have taste. And so if we hear Bhagavatam from pure devotees who do relish it, or do relish him, then in that way we actually can have that echo of relationship with Bhagavatam. And so then this is about the verse 38. So the gopis want to serve so much that they do not care for anything else. And we heard descriptions of that. The moment the gopis hear Krishna's flute, they drop everything, whether it's breastfeeding their children or milking cows or boiling milk on the stovetop or churning butter or whatever they're doing. They just drop everything and nothing else matters. And so it's actually really beautiful to see that in order for them to leave their dance, he needs to manifest embarrassment within their consciousness and their heart as the Lord of consciousness to support them in leaving. And so it's this, in a way, a loving friction of Krishna and the gopis loving each other so much that they don't want to leave him, and that he needs to somehow incite them. And of course, there are also his internal expansions, but he needs to somehow incite them so they are able to leave, because otherwise, without that support, there's no way that they would be able to even leave his association. And this is the topmost perfection. Like they are not caring for anything else. So Krishna needs to plant some form of embarrassment of the seniors or the elders, what others are going to say, so that they can leave. And I don't want to compare ourselves with the gopis, of course, and yet we have that this is the highest standard. And I'm thinking about myself, of how often am I leaving by myself? I don't need any support to leave the temple, to leave my chanting, to leave my service, to allow my mind to drift away and do whatever it does in its whirlwinds. And here we have, excuse me, the highest of the gopis never wanting to leave, and even cursing their eyelids for having eyelids, so that they have to blink and lose the sight of the Lord. So that is really beautiful, and we see that this is the actual life. In my notes I wrote, being swayed from one desire to another, from one I need the water, sorry. Being swayed from one desire to another, from one sense screaming to be satisfied, then another arguing or taking over. Is this life? No. Spiritual life is simple: chanting and hearing and avoiding offenses. And what makes our life complex is the whole entanglement that our desires spin. Because when we have desires, then they ask us to create a whole bunch of arrangements to fulfill them. And then they ask us more, because they are very unsatisfied servants. Sorry, not servants, masters. We are servants who can never actually serve well. And there's never a point of satisfaction. And in turn, we can choose another master, which is the Lord, who can be satisfied and who can bring satisfaction to our own hearts. And so again, we can choose the actual life, which is in connecting with Krishna, and connecting with his devotees, and connecting with his pastimes, and all the ways in which he is alive in that. And verse 39 really delineates for me our conditioning. And this is the mercy that we receive from the disciples of Srila Prabhupada that speak on his behalf and for his pleasure, that it shows we have such a strong conditioning that we are not able to understand those pastimes with our conditioned perceptions. And these pastimes have absolutely nothing to do with what we know and what we are familiar with. And to me, this is always a very potent reminder. I was given an advice in the past when reading such exalted pastimes, that the moment there is a thought that begins with comparisons, that I'm starting to think about, like, oh, I used to have romantic relationship, and this is similar to what Krishna does with the gopis. This is the moment when I'm supposed to put down the pastime or the reading and really reconnect with remembering that this is completely pure and it has absolutely nothing to do with what I am knowing and what is my conditioning. And knowing is the relative term. It's essentially what I'm familiar with and what my perceptions are filled with. And so again, Krishna and his pastimes are completely pure. Hence, they cannot be contaminated. And this is why in this beautiful arrangement, even if we hear such pastimes so exalted, we are actually becoming purified, because anything that comes in touch with the all pure, which can never be contaminated, and we are the contaminated ones, it becomes purified. And there is often a symbol of the sun, just like when the sun rays shine, the water evaporates and everything is being purified. With time, the strength of the sun purifies. In that way too, even if there is shadow, it cannot escape the light of Bhagavat and the light of the Lord. Let's see what I wrote in my other notes. Yes, this is the point I was meditating on, because the purport speaks about cultivating attachment to such pastimes of the Lord and to the Lord through his pastimes. Because I also know it can be more vaguely spoken about cultivating attachment to the pastimes of the Lord. And so here again, we have the choices, just like the choices between the two masters. We have the choices between what or who are we cultivating attachment towards. And so if we cultivate attachment towards material association, which is also described in the verse, that is our greatest misery, and we are going to be degraded, and we are going to fall down again into a hole of misery and suffering away from the Lord. As it said, there is a God-shaped hole that can never be filled by anything else. And we have a choice to cultivate attachment to the Lord of his devotees. And so in that association, we become freed and also satisfied. That's again when our heart truly becomes satisfied. And so Guru and Krishna are incredible friends that we have a chance to connect with. I heard this heavy statement by my Gurudev in the past, in a lecture that I think I heard perhaps 3 months ago, and I've been meditating on it since then. That Guru and Krishna are our only friends. And when I heard it, I was actually quite bewildered. But after speaking about it and asking questions and meditating, what came is that Guru and Krishna are our dear friends, and they have incredible capacities to hold us in a way that, because of our conditioning and because of us yet not having even connected with enough, at least I'm speaking about myself, with enough self-acceptance or that ability to understand how the world works through the perception of Bhagavatam, my capacity is very limited to even hold others or to truly be tolerant and to truly be humble. But the capacity of Guru and Krishna is so great that they're able to hold us completely as we are and simultaneously support us on the way of the purification to serve better. And also they're able to completely and more reciprocate with our endeavors and our cultivation of love towards them. And so it's this beautiful cycle of that shows that Guru and Krishna are the personalities, and of course the devotees that we're able to safely offer ourselves completely to, which is actually a very high position. And of course, that is the position that belongs to the Lord and his representatives. So if we think about that in relationships, it takes so much to be able to fully accept somebody else and then to reciprocate with the love that they're giving. And to think about that we are able to offer ourselves completely and give more and more, and that it grows eternally and expands eternally, is actually a very high position, which shows the potency, this expansive, all-loving, all-encompassing qualities of the Lord. And I want to end just speaking about how fortunate we are to have Srimad Bhagavatam and to read it. First of all, that's again something that we can safely be attached to, and that's what we become in this way attached to Bhagavatam. It actually frees us. And then there's this beautiful line which I actually really cherish, which is, once having directly experienced the Supreme, one will not return to the material pleasures. Which reminds me of Prabhupada saying, we've given so many lives to the cycle of material enjoyment, and now we can give just one life to Krishna. And if we do it well, this one life is enough to actually transport us back to the loving eternal service of the Supreme. And this is again our fortune, and also it's our fortune that Krishna meets us where we are, in a way that oftentimes throughout Bhagavatam we have those statements, for the one who hears these pastimes, they attain this benediction. For the one that hears this pastime, they actually become attached to the lotus feet of the Lord. And here we also have that those who hear these pastimes are actually blessed and very fortunate. And so on every step of the way, coming towards Krishna is a blessing, and it's always a good choice to choose the Lord, even in minute ways. I hope that this wasn't so all over the place. I myself feel a little bit windy in my mind, but I would like to pause here and invite reflections, corrections, especially corrections, comments, questions, and chastisements.
Thank you so much, Ananda Manjari Prabhu, for I didn't think it was too windy. I tried. It's really hard to do your service of being a scribe in the chat. You do such a beautiful job of it. I was trying to do it, and it's definitely challenging. Some of my reflections, I really loved your points of thinking of exclusive service to the Lord and that exclusivity, and that love. It really reminded me of what Nityananda Chandra Prabhu was saying yesterday about how we can't have a relationship with Anonymous. And then at the same time, like, I feel like your conversation or your class today is like a continuation of that. Like, once we know that it's not an anonymous person and it's a person, then we can choose to have an exclusive relationship with them, right? And have that exclusive relationship with Krishna. And then my big thing that I really take away is offering everything to Krishna, and especially all those little moments throughout the day that, as you said, even the ones where maybe are not in the highest consciousness, but we can still offer it up to Krishna. And I was just wondering, my last point is a question.
Yes.
What have you found in either hearing from, more realized souls, or just from your personal experience, what have you found that helps you the most to kind of, in those moments when you're in those lower kind of consciousness in the day, to bring you up? Like, what have you found helpful? Thank you.
Thank you so much for those reflections and the question. I have two things that actually have been supporting me, and this is both coming from my own experience, and it's also reflected from the classes of my Gurudev and Keshava Maharaj. One thing is simply to acknowledge, like I've been recently thinking a lot about Arjuna simply saying, like, the mind is like the wind. It's so hard to control it. And yet nothing, like not a blade of grass, moves without Krishna's sanction. And so to even remember that the mind is like the wind that can be controlled, and yet the Lord is the one who actually can harness that wind as well. And so the first thing is that I actually acknowledge, and this is for me, it's very freeing. Each time I do it, I'm like, wow, that's actually a first moment of relief to simply acknowledge I'm not my mind. Like my mind is this subtler body that I carry, and yet it's still a layer of conditioning. And so to acknowledge that, and I even sometimes play my mind, like imagine my mind as being another personality, almost like this grumpy child that is like on top of me always and never wants to leave me. And just thinking about like, okay, let me actually engage with this entity and acknowledge that there's a higher aspect that I want to connect with. So that has been very supportive for me, because in that way then it also brings me compassion, because then I'm thinking about like, oh yes, all this conditioning, like now I'm having an opportunity to see it because Krishna gives me the perception, and I can navigate that. And then again, that usually comes, and of course I fail so many times, but there are moments when I can celebrate, and also what's important is to celebrate those moments, to even have those micro moments of, oh, instead of, I don't know, listening to a song that I'm trying to learn in Arabic, and it's actually still devotional, but still, like, instead of hearing that, I actually decided to chant more. Or instead of watching TV or anything, I chose to read more. And so to actually celebrate those moments is creating a stronger impression that this is what actually helps us. Another thing that really touched me was what I heard from Keshava Maharaj. And it was a very, very simple comparison, but it revealed to me how impersonal my perceptions can be. And it's that he simply compared the relationship with the divinity to what we know, in a way of like, think about if you ever been in love or any close relationship that you had, and how much it took to build towards that. Like if you are in love with somebody, what do? Like, you think about them at all times. You want to know the details about what color they liked to wear when they were children, where they grew up, what were their friends, what is their like fourth name, whatever that they were given as a nickname. And then what do you do with the person that you love? Like, you want to speak with them often, you want to like give them gifts, you want to spend time together, you want to tell them about like how your day was, and perhaps like send them a good night message or whatever. And so all of these things we do that we are familiar with in our so-called mundane, I mean, with devotees, these relationships are not mundane, but we do that in our kind of more so everyday relationships. And then think about translating that into the connection with Krishna. And I find myself that to be being caught off guard, because I would sometimes think about like, yeah, why wouldn't I like tell Krishna about how my day was, or actually decide, like choose to learn all of his names and like learn the meaning of those names and how they relate to every single individual pastimes that he has. And so in these ways, I find that this is an opportunity for me to just continuously think, like, how can I actually translate that with the Lord of all relationships and the source of all relationships, which is the Supreme Lord. And so these two things have been supportive for me, thinking about, like, even in those moments of feeling the lowest, there is still a relationship I have with the Lord, and how can I actually pick myself up towards that, which is already a saving grace to remember, oh, I have a connection with Krishna. And then even if it means coming before the altar and saying, like, I'm really struggling with my rounds today, like, I'm so sorry, I really want to connect with you. And so yeah, my solution is, I would say, remembering the personalism and trying to go as deep as possible into that. I hope that was somehow supportive.
Yes, thank you. And Jeffrey, Prabhu has his hand up.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Ananda Manjari. That was beautiful.
Krishna.
I feel like we've been blessed over the past 3 days with a connected theme that Damodar Priya was mentioning. You know, on Wednesday, Gaurasharan said, let's remember that this place is a person. And then the other day, and then Nityananda said, you can't have a relationship with an unknown benefactor.
Correct.
You know, so the influence to get to know who that benefactor is, and then today, it's like the cherry on top. It's like, all right, so now we've recognized that the place is a person. We've learned about who that person is, and then what you said today about connect with all the ways the Lord is alive. Like, now it's like, all right, now we know where we are. We know that this place is a person. You know, we've got, you know, kind of a gist of who they are, and now we're falling in love with them, right? And then to develop that taste, to have that exclusive relationship, it just feels very much like a continuation. Like Damodar Priya said, is very blessed to have these 3 lessons this week, and topped off with what you said today. So beautiful. Thank you. But along with that, and I think to a certain extent you kind of answered it in Damodar Priya's question, but those finding out the ways the Lord is alive. It's interesting in that exclusivity. In a material sense, the gopis longing, if it were a material relationship, is almost melodramatic. But in the sense of an exclusive relationship with infinitely powerful, infinitely loving, infinitely intelligent being, it becomes totally natural. And I loved your point about, like, it's so easy for me to just leave the temple. I can just get up and walk out. And those pangs in the heart don't necessarily happen when you leave the temple. And so how do we stop and recognize that the Lord is alive? And I think to a certain extent you've already answered some of that in the, you know, getting out of our darkest moments. So but I do think that that's a beautiful reflection for us today. Thank you.
Shall we stay for afterwards?
Yes, we can do after. Well, it's Saturday.
Sundarangam Gandharva-kodikamaniya Visita-shobha Govinda Adipurusha Tamaham Bhajami Govinda Adipurusha Tamaham Bhajami Govinda Adipurusha Tamaham Bhajami Anjani Yasya Sakale Priyavedimati Asyantripam Vikayanti Shivam Yananti Ananda Chimaya Sadhu Jaya Vigasya Govinda.
Thank you so much, Adipurusha Prabhu, as always, for giving us darshan. And we will continue with the Africal so that Ananda Manjari can answer Jeffrey's reflection and question.
Yes, thank you so much. So I wanted to say one thing that came to me was something I heard, which was that those who have ears, but they don't hear Krishna's flute as he plays standing on the banks of Yamuna, their ears are useless. And those who have ears that don't hear the ankle bells of the Lord as he passes, leaving his kumkuma powdered footprints in the sand, those ears are useless. And for those who hear Bhagavatam and they don't go through their ears drinking that nectar, their ears are useless. And so it just shows what your question to me brings, this awareness of this is actually how it's supposed to be. Like Krishna is so attractive that when we see the Lord, we should be like fainting. And Bhagavatam is so nectarian. Like when Parikshit Maharaj hears Bhagavatam, and especially the parts when many of us can see as a little boring, of like, oh, this is just lineages being described. And Parikshit Maharaj is like, wow, this is so amazing. I'm cherishing it so much. And the reason why is because he hears all those names and he knows the relationship of the name with the pastimes of the Lord, and then all of these devotees serving the Lord, that he relishes just hearing the names because it brings so much remembrance. And so in that way, it shows like this is actually how big our conditioning is. And like, if I am not hearing Krishna's flute, if I'm not crying with like how much I'm cherishing Bhagavatam when reading or hearing it, it means that this is the amount of how sick I am and how much covering there is that actually prevents me from doing that. And so how do we see that the Lord is alive? First step is actually acknowledging like the Lord is alive. It's my perception that holds me back from seeing him as alive. Just like Radha Murlidhar, they are alive on the altar, dancing, playing flute. Gaurachandra is, raising his arm and giving blessings to all the devotees, everybody who comes before him. And if we are not able to see that, it's our perception and covering. It's not that they are not alive. And then with acknowledging that can bring us into an experience of humility and crying out in surrender and crying out for the mercy, realizing that this is the only way, because we cannot purify ourselves. The Lord purifies us. And through connecting with the holy name purifies us. And so Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, it's said that this is his most important teaching, which is the teaching of the seer and the seen. And what it means is that when we stand before the deities, we actually don't look at the deities. We present ourselves to the deities. and say, Lord, please accept me. This is who I am right now. And I know that you are so loving that you can embrace all of it and support me on the way to serving you. And if you choose, when the time is right, please grant me your vision so I can one day see you. And so in that way, it's actually the reversal of like, all we have to do is first recognize that we are actually sick, and secondly, to actually cry so that we can attain that state of purification, so we can serve the Lord in our state without conditioning or without material conditioning. Is it satisfactory for you?
That was beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Ananda Manjari Prabhu, do you have time for Bhima? Prabhu, he has